with this Jussie Smollett, so that's certainly interesting. Also, we have leaked photos of U.S. border facilities overwhelmed by migrants, as well as protesters taking over Border Patrol museums and defacing pictures of fallen Border Patrol officers. Also, the Mexican cartel ambushed Mexican soldiers near the Texas border, so violence is upticking there. And we also have the story that we're starting the show.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning. I was just telling the online audience all the things that we have coming up on the program. Ran out of time, didn't get to it all. So at the top of the next hour, we'll be going over the Conduit scorecard as part of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly here in the state of Arkansas. So feel free, you can go to conduitnews.com, get a sneak peek, but we'll be talking to Mr. Josh Waters on that coming up at 7:05. Then at 7:33, we're going to be talking with a professor of the UALR Bowen School of Law. His name is Robert Steinbuch. I sat down with him yesterday, actually, to talk about Arkansas's Freedom of Information Act law, specifically a bill by Senator Kim Hammer that would expand Arkansas's Freedom of Information Act law that would apply to some of these private entities that are doing taxpayer-funded missions. And it's pretty fascinating stuff, you know. Part of the reason, what we got to in the interview was that part of the reason these entities are established in the first place, part of the reason is to keep taxpayers in the dark. So we will address that more. Again, that's coming up at 7:33. But my goodness, we've got so much to get to today. Let's start with the first. This is the story. This is, I don't know. By the way, I woke up this morning with some sort of bronchitis. I mean, just kind of out of the blue. I don't really know what happened. But I'm gonna power through. Joe, can you throw this story up? It's a link to a local. Radio station, WBRC, not really sure where that's out of. But sailor in iconic World War II kiss photo. You remember this photo? Everybody does. He passed away the other day at 95 years old. This kiss, show this photo. This kiss took place in Times Square, and the man died. And his name is George Mendoza. Show the photo again. Now look at this. I'm telling you right now. A lot of toxic masculinity right there. Fight the patriarchy, right? Yeah, that was back when, I'm telling you, if my grandparents were alive right now, and they were in their, post-World War II, 20, 21, 22-year-old bodies, they'd come back here, and there's just no question. I mean, they'd stop some of the stuff that's going on right now just by their sheer just protest or whatever you want to call it. That's because the government has changed in such a degree. The psychological relationship between citizen and government has changed to such a degree. 95 years old, George Mendoza passed away. According to WBRC, they described this as the ecstatic sailor shown kissing a woman in Times Square, celebrating the end of World War II, has died. Mendoza's daughter, whose name is Sharon, told the Providence Journal Mendoza had a seizure Sunday at the assisted living facility in Middletown, Rhode Island, where he lived. with his wife of 70 years. Mendoza was shown kissing Greta Zimmer Friedman, a dental assistant in a nurse's uniform, on August 14th, 1945. See here the photo by, let's see, it was years before Mendoza and Friedman were confirmed to be the couple. So anyway, that took place. He passed away, according to this, yesterday sometime. So, you know, it certainly is the, you know what I'll say? I'll say what these people on CNN said with this whole, Jussie Smollett situation. Wow, this is 2019. Yeah, this certainly is 2019, isn't it? Certainly is. Did anybody see, this was probably the biggest story to me over the last 24 hours. Lara Logan. You guys remember who Lara Logan is? So Lara Logan is best known for a tragedy, a sexual assault that took place against her when she's covering remember the Arab Spring? Do you remember this? The Arab Spring, it started with a guy in Tunisia that set himself on fire. And everybody's like, the Arab Spring, the Arab Spring. Well, eventually that led to Egypt, right? And there was this uprising, and it was supported by Obama, and Egypt was different. Of course, then the military came back in and took over because they didn't even like what was going on. But you had a CBS News war correspondent, Lara Logan, in the midst of it. And suddenly a mob of Muslim men, they grab her, they tear her clothes off, they try to scalp her, they take photos of her, and they sexually assault her. They literally try to rip her to pieces. She's quoted as saying, this is Lara Logan, quoted as saying at the time when she was reflecting of the terrible event, that every time she screamed, it whipped the men up into more of a frenzy, meaning her screams were actually fueling their evil, psychotic, sexual desires. To do this to a blonde Western woman. She's from South Africa, but anyway, so she is now trending on Twitter because of a interview that she did with a former Navy SEAL who's got a podcast. Let me see what his name is here. I forgot. His name is Mike Ritland. He's a former Navy SEAL. He has this podcast. It's called Mike Drop, and so he's interviewing Lara Logan, and we have the tweet. There's actually a Twitter video here, Joe, I want to play, and all of a sudden she gets asked about media bias. And she specifically mentioned Breitbart, not that one, that one. And so here is Mike Ritland's podcast, an answer from Lara Logan. And this is, and she even said this later in the podcast, that this is career suicide. As being a journalist the way she is, this is career suicide for her to admit it. But listen to what she says.
And the media everywhere is mostly liberal, not just in the U.S. But in this country, 85% of journalists are registered Democrats. So that's just a fact, right? No one's registering Democrat when they're rarely a Republican. So the facts are on the side of what you just stated. Most journalists are left or liberal or Democrat or whatever word you want to give it. How do you know you're being lied to? How do you know you're being manipulated? How do you know there's something not right with the coverage? When they simplify it all, and there's no gray. There's no gray. It's all one way. Well, life isn't like that. If it doesn't match real life, it's probably not, something's wrong, right? So, for example, all the coverage on Trump all the time is negative. There's nothing, no mitigating policy or event or anything that has happened since he was elected that is out there in the medias that you can read about, right? Well, that tells you that's distortion of the way things go in real life. Because although the media has always been, historically, always been left-leaning, we've abandoned our pretense, or at least the effort, to be objective today. The former executive editor of the New York Times has a book coming out, Jill Abramson, and she says we would do, I don't know, dozens of stories about Trump every single day, And every single one of them was negative. She said, we have become the anti-Trump paper of record. Well, that's not our job. That's a political position. That means we've become political activists, in a sense. And some could argue propagandists, right? And there's some merit to that.
Oh, I mean, wow. Okay, so that is journalist Lara Logan. And again, that was on the Mike Ritland podcast there. Pretty astonishing stuff, right? Now, my question here is, do you think she came to this conclusion because after the, let's say, after her horrific rape or gang rape there in Egypt, again, where they, I mean, if you go read her description of it, it's absolutely horrifying. She thought she was dying because she was. If it what saved her was a Muslim woman in a complete hijab, head to toe. The only thing she could see was her eyes. Somehow got her away and led her away from the crowd. But do you think that experience, and specifically the mainstream media's coverage of it, had anything to do with the way she feels, the way she does now? No, don't get me wrong. The mainstream media covered what happened to Lara Logan in Egypt during what was supposed to be this amazing Arab Spring. They covered it because they had to cover it. Specifically, I think she was with CBS News. CBS News had to cover it. This is one of their foreign correspondents that was almost killed. So they had to cover it. But then you go from there, like, okay, this isn't just some other culture, that's on par with Western societies, Western civilizations. That's not what Egypt is. That's not what the Muslim world is. Let's post a flag here and let's start covering this. And when it comes to this specific culture that is very regressive, the actual definition of regressive. No, not the Republican Party. That's not regressive. What's going on in the Middle East is. But from that, no, I mean, it's still a policy. Well, not all Muslims are like that. They always have to qualify. Well, not everybody. Well, of course, not everybody. Anyway, it is very interesting to me. Anyway, she's trending on Twitter, Lara Logan. If you go back up here in this article, Malia Obama, Roger Stone, Lara Logan, number 3, 43,000 tweets on this issue. I'm just curious. I don't know. Will this wake more people up? Maybe. It'll wake more people up until Jack Dorsey decides to censor what they don't want getting out on their platform. Speaking of censoring, we all now know that the police, the Chicago police, for now, I'm waiting on Rahm Emanuel or somebody to tell the Chicago police to drop this whole Jussie Smollett. It's making the Democrats look ridiculous. By the way, this Jussie Smollett guy, I now know, I didn't really know this yesterday, I now know, big pals with Democrats, big pals with Kamala Extract Harris, big pals with Michelle Obama, just this Empire actor, Jussie Smollett. Big pals. Big pal. You can go. Just do a Google image search of those people together. Multiple events, and it's now being reported that Jussie Smollett staged. Again, America's so great that in order to be oppressed, you got to hire 2 Nigerians to beat you up and put a noose around your neck. This is MAGA country in Chicago, Illinois, at 3 a.m. in the morning, boy. So. Sorry. I mean, the whole thing was preposterous. So it's now being reported that this Jussie Smollett guy, okay, he staged the attack because he wrote an anti-Trump letter to himself. I'm sorry. He wrote a Trump-supporting racist letter to himself. So he faked the letter first. And that didn't get enough attention, so he's like, oh, that didn't get enough attention. Okay, well, boom. And again, you got to remember, this was right after the Covington High School boys story blew up in the media's face, okay? And the media, and they wanted to win. They wanted to reinforce this narrative that Trump is racist, everything about him is racist, all the supporters are racist. This was right after the BuzzFeed story that said that Donald Trump told the attorney, Michael Cohen, to lie to Congress. And then, of course, Robert Mueller came in and said, that's not correct. That's not an accurate story. So the media had egg all over their face then. They had egg all over their face with Covington. But now we've got the Jussie Smollett. No, you don't, because he faked it all. He hired 2 black guys to beat him up. Can you believe this? I mean, it literally, I have said this before. The media continues to fall into their own nets. They are laying out nets, and they continue to fall into their own nets. It's almost like it's supernatural. I've never seen anything like it. I really haven't. I really haven't ever seen anything like this. And I've been covering the news media for 10 years, and they most always get away with this kind of stuff. Most always they do. Not anymore. They're not getting away with it now. I mean, you still have the media with their fake polling and everything else. They're trying desperately to hold on. The internet is a huge problem for them because it's a free exchange of information. You have anybody who's got a computer can be some form of journalist now and participate in some form of journalism, even at the most basic levels. That's a huge problem for them. But speaking of censorship, Facebook is censoring, according to PJ Media. Look at this headline. Facebook is banning conservative articles exposing the Jussie Smollett hoax. Because you got to remember, there's 18, 20 million people that think that Jussie Smollett, Jussie hoax, is still a victim here. And so they're trying to get the truth out there. Let's see here. Over the weekend, Facebook prevented people from sharing 2 conservative articles on the unraveling case of Empire star Jussie Smollett, which seemed to be a hate hoax. Both Rod Drether, author of The Benedict Opinion, A Strategy for Christians in a Post-Christian Nation, and Daily Caller reporter Jen Kearns saw their articles censored on Facebook. Quote, "You are not allowed to say on Facebook that Jussie Smollett carried out a hate hoax," Dreher tweeted on Sunday, with a screenshot of Facebook blocking his article at The American Conservative. Let's see. According to the screenshot, Facebook blocked the article because it appeared to be spam and said the post goes against our community standards. You mean the community standards of Facebook is if you expose Democrats and their lies and the media, you're blocked and banned. Facebook lifted the ban later on Sunday, though. On Saturday, lawyer Harmeet K. Dillon shared the news that Jen Kearns' article had been blocked as well, allegedly for violating community standards. Listen, we got to go to break here in a minute, but there are studies out there that say conservatives are being blocked on Twitter, are being censored on Twitter 22-1. Do you know this? Now, there are liberals out there that don't. There are liberals who are kind of liberty-minded still, and they reject. They don't want to hear this, but it's the truth. We are burning books in our society now. That's what we're doing. We are essentially burning books, and the internet is such a big beast. It's in our lives like we never thought it would be, and there's got to be something done about this. I know they are private companies. I understand that. But we've never had anything that it is now the way we communicate. It's now the way we share ideas. And I want you to understand something here. At what point is the internet a public sidewalk? And I'm just asking the question because I want you to imagine the power that somebody has here. Back before the internet, can you imagine if there was the power to control your mind to where when you're driving down the road going to work, there was somebody somewhere that could control which picket signs on the sidewalk that you saw, or which political signs, that are stuck in the ground, which ones that you can see and which ones you can't. Yeah, or when you're at home, which commercials you can see. I want you to imagine that somebody had that power before the internet ever existed. You're driving down the road and you can't see that there's a protest over here and what it's about because there's somebody that literally can just say, those protesters don't exist. Those signs don't exist. Those memes don't exist. Those messages don't exist. That's where we are today. That is an enormous amount of power. We got to take a break. Back in a moment.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
It has been last week, and I said this, we did a Facebook Live hit
really the day of. Last week was one of the most positive weeks that I've really ever been experienced, here at the Capitol. And it really had to do with a Senate Public Health Committee where Senator Jason Rapert went before that committee and very eloquently presented his bill, which is called across the nation an abortion trigger law. But effectively what it would do is it would ban abortion in Arkansas with the exception of the life of the mother if and when Roe versus Wade is overturned. And of course, there's a lot of talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg being the next vacancy on the court, and that would mean President Trump would get a third Supreme Court justice. It's the left's nightmare. Joining us more to talk about this Arkansas bill that
who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So John Binder, with his headline, U.S. taxpayers fund border walls in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Middle East. And this is a sobering reminder, and it's actually, it's an outrage when you think about it. Democrats have no problem with American taxpayers funding border security in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Egypt, and Lebanon. They got no problem with that. The United States-Mexico border only received $1.3 billion for the construction of a border wall that is overwhelmed right now. The southern border is completely overwhelmed. Matter of fact, I'm about to show you some photos. But you've got foreign countries that are getting help from American taxpayers to secure their borders and everything. Everybody's cool with that. There's something weird. There's something strange about that, folks. The Republican-Democrat bill signed by Trump last week provides Pakistan with at least $15 million in U.S. taxpayer money for border security programs, as well as funding for cross-border stabilization between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In total, spending bill $6 billion in American taxpayer money to finance foreign military, some of which can be used by Lebanon to strengthen border security and combat terrorism, according to the bill. That's a quote from the bill, strengthen border security, combat terrorism. The spending bill provides $112.5 million in U.S. taxpayer money for economic support for Egypt, including $10 million for scholarships for Egyptian students. Egypt's military receives about $1.3 billion in the spending bill, some of which can be for border security programs. You know what? We've got a huge military. We got a huge Department of Defense. People say this is politics. This is politics. This is a political emergency. No. Now, politics and ideas in the debate, that's what put Trump in the White House. This is an emergency, and it's been an emergency for decades. And Republicans and Democrats have been silent because listen, average Americans aren't voting for Democrats anymore. I don't know if you've seen the state houses lately, but average Americans aren't voting for Democrats anymore, so they need illegal aliens to vote. They want future voters. They want them to make them legal. And Republican of the wealthy donor class, they want the cheap labor. And so both parties have done nothing. And it took a businessman to get in there and be like, oh, yeah, this is an emergency. We need to stop this.
We have Senator Jason Rapert with us right now. Senator Rapert, thanks so much for spending time with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you for your interest. And, today is actually the day, Paul. Representative Mary Bentley will be presenting SB 149 on the floor of the Arkansas House. And I think it's very fitting that on Valentine's Day, Arkansas may be given the gift of abolishing abortion as soon as we are given that authority back by the federal government.
That's very well said. And I would just say this. There's a lot of people anticipating Roe versus Wade going away, and they're doing the opposite of what you're trying to do, Senator, what the General Assembly is trying to do. You have New York and Virginia, and what they are doing is really just, and I think you mentioned this, a crime against humanity.
That's right. And, the SB 149, the bill that we put together, we really wanted to lay out, and I noticed that you actually, that spoke to you a lot. I could tell when I visited with you in the comments that you had sent to me. In the front of the bill, we put in legislative findings there, Paul. And in those legislative findings, we very specifically and for a special reason call out the grave injustice and the crime against humanity that we believe abortion has been in the nation. When you take a look back at history, you go back to the 1860s, and it was the Democrats who were saying that black-skinned people were less than human beings, that they were not full persons. And it took an overturn of the Dred Scott decision by the Supreme Court to overturn a prior decision, of course, there, to actually say that no, African-American people are full persons. That was a grave injustice, and unfortunately went through a civil war that dealt somewhat with that same right. Then you move forward, dealing also again with our African-American fellow Americans here that are black-skinned people. You have the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, which said that they were not fully persons, that they were not given the same rights. That was segregation, the separate but equal decision. And it took the Brown versus Board of Education decision, overturning a 58-year precedent, to then right that horrible wrong, which was a grave injustice against the African-American people of this nation. And what we're saying is that when you look at civil rights, the most fundamental and the first right that we have is the right to life. And that right has been
the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, coming up here in just a little bit, we're going to be talking with Mr. Josh Waters coming up in 7:05. And that's not just a little bit for you, but for Radio Gab, that's in just a little bit. My whole concept of time, just so you know, like it'll be 20 minutes till the top of the hour, let's say. And my wife will be like, let's say it's like 6:40, at night. And my wife will be like, what time is it? I'll be like, oh, it's almost 7. She's like, it's not almost 7. 6:40. Yeah. To me, that's almost 7. It just is because, I don't know, because I'm constantly, I got a clock right here, and to me, that means it's almost 7. I don't know. Like I'm about to start doing this segment here, and it's kind of like I'll time travel. I can just start talking, and you look up, and it's 6:34 right now. I'm going to look up here in just a minute, and 15 minutes are going to have gone by. Anyway. All right, so let's talk. We're going to get some Arkansas news here in a minute, by the way, so just hang on for that. I want to talk about these leaked photos. Can we show these leaked photos for a second? No, not that. Right here, the cartel ambushes. No, not that. So here we go, exclusive. Leaked photos shown at the U.S. border facility overwhelmed by migrants. Now, I want you to just look at this photo real quick. This is an exclusive photo from Breitbart News. And look at this. Joe, can you throw this up there real quick? The leaked photos, exclusive leaked photos here. This is from a border detention facility. Now, so look at all the shiny aluminum foil blankets. You see that? And then scrolling down even further, look at this right here. See all those people sardined into this room trying to get some sleep? Do you see this? You scroll down more. One more. You see this? I can't think of anything worse. And that's just absolutely miserable conditions. Standing room only, and it's just awful. Okay? And according to Brandon Darby, the images were provided by a source operating under the umbrella of CBP, who spoke with Breitbart on the condition of anonymity and stated, quote, "The medical staff at the facility can't keep doing this. They are getting overwhelmed." Now, is that a crisis? You think that's a crisis? Do we need to stop people from using our resources? Another source operating under the umbrella of CBP spoke with Breitbart under the same conditions and stated this is no different than what we were dealing with during the Obama administration. This is happening in the Rio Grande Valley sector, the Del Rio sector, the El Paso sector, the Tucson sector, the Yuma sector, and the San Diego sector. It's almost across the entire southwest border. They are being overwhelmed by migrant families. We are basically facilitating Mexican cartels' migrant smuggling operation into the interior of America. We are babysitting and not securing our border. The flow shows no signs of abating, and it keeps increasing. So what I have been advocating on this program is that this is an emergency, and it's been an emergency for decades, certainly years, but no one has covered it. Now, I can't say that. It's not that no one wasn't covering it, because the great Lou Dobbs has been covering this for 10 years. The great Lou Dobbs has been covering this for 10 years plus. And it's always disturbed him. I couldn't really figure out why. I would always watch him on CNN, and, that was back when you would watch CNN and at least tolerate it. And I'm thinking, why does he spend every it seems like for a while there, especially back in 2000 and let me think here, 2007, 2008. It seemed like every one of his programs, he would open talking about the southern border. I mean, he's the only one that would do it. This has been going on for a very long time. And yet nobody has wanted to secure this until President Trump brought it to the forefront. I mean, the American people have been knowing what's going on, but it's just complete disconnect. I mean, in President Trump's State of the Union address, when he said that there is no greater issue that highlights the division between, Washington, D.C. elites or political elites and the average American than illegal immigration. I'm paraphrasing, but he said basically that, and then he mentioned the fact that, we have all of these people, our politicians that don't want to secure the border, but yet they live behind gated communities with walls. They lock their doors at night and everything else. And by the way, if you've got one of these liberals in your life who's completely buying into all of this progressive nonsense, and they think it's wrong or immoral to build a wall, then you need to just ask them politely if they lock their doors at night. And if they say yes, you need to say, well, is that not hypocritical of you? If you're going to lock your doors at night, then you should have no problem with our country trying to figure out and regulate who comes in and who goes out. And you got to do that with a border wall. That's all we're talking about here. Now, that's just the basic concept. The fact of the matter is, fentanyl is a chemical weapon. The fact of the matter is, human trafficking and sex trafficking is a big business in this world that we live in. No one wants to talk about it. I wonder why. But it's a big business. And the Democrat Party sat on their hands when President Trump said he's going to put the sex traffickers and the MS-13 gang members out of business. When he said he's going to put the cartel out of business. The operative word there is business. We're talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about a lot of money. And it all comes down to the money, doesn't it? Okay, so you got that. Then you have some soldiers. Now, it's important. We're talking about Mexican soldiers here, not United States soldiers. Because when I first saw this headline yesterday, I thought, oh, okay, we've just kicked off we've kicked off a war. Because the headline I saw was cartel ambushes soldiers on border. And I thought, well, we've got troops at the border. Surely the Mexican cartel is not stupid enough to kill an American soldier at the border. If that happens, we're talking about... I have no doubt in my mind President Donald Trump is going to... would unleash hell at the border. So, it's a cartel that ambushed Mexican soldiers. And they killed some members of the Mexican military. Let's see. There were citizen journalists there using a Twitter account. They warned residents stay away from the Palmares neighborhood when the ambush began. A video recording shared by the Twitter account at El Pueblo 2 captured the sound of the clash as the two sides exchanged gunfire. And anyway, so it ended up being, I mean, the aggregated headline that I saw was a little misleading, but still, it is one of the most violent places on the planet. And then the last story concerning illegal immigration and the disaster border, the national emergency that we have, the disaster of border security, lack of border security. Headline, protesters take over Border Patrol Museum and deface pictures of fallen immigration soldiers or immigration officers. Dozens of demonstrators, according to the Washington Examiner, dozens of demonstrators occupied and vandalized a privately owned U.S. Border Patrol museum near El Paso, Texas over the weekend. Museum Director David Ham told the Washington Examiner his staff and guests worried for their safety Saturday when a group of about 50 rowdy protesters entered the facility, defaced property, and refused to leave the grounds. Thanks a lot, Beto. Quote, say it loud, say it clear, Border Patrol kills. Group members standing inside and outside the facility yelled. Security cameras set up outside the private museum captured protesters pulling into the parking lot and putting on face masks. So they're Antifa? Is that what we're talking about here? Antifa storming privately owned museums commemorating the border. You know, hey, the Fort Smith people better thank themselves that the U.S. Marshals aren't at the border, because your little Marshal Museum up there, the U.S. Marshal Service kills. And U.S. Marshals say, yeah, you're absolutely right, we do. It was very intimidating. It says Ham, who was not at the museum at the time of the incident, said he got a call from an upset staff member. Quote, we have cameras and we saw them gathering in the parking lot. We saw them come in the museum. She called 911. I was able to watch the cameras on my cell phone. They came in after putting masks on. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine if you're the worker at this museum in El Paso, Texas, and you're watching the security camera and you're like, oh, there's a bunch of people out there. We're about to have some customers. Wait, they're putting masks on. They know this isn't a bank, right? Like, what in the world? Well, they were coming there to vandalize. They were coming there to destroy. They proceeded to set up a bunch of signs and just went all over the museum. They, of course, had an agenda. They were chanting and singing songs, and then a couple of them got on a bullhorn. We had visitors in the museum. They started talking and kind of harassing them. Of course, the staff was asking them to leave, and they wouldn't leave. Ham said his staff led non-protesting visitors to the back of the gift shop so they could hide until police arrived. The group, which calls itself Tornillo, the occupation Tornillo, Tornillo. Tornillo, the occupation, live streamed the protest. Footage showed dozens of people whose faces were covered with garments walking into the museum and fanning out through the building. The Facebook group who sponsored this, I guess Tornillo, they said that their goal was to, quote, expose the true violence of borders and border patrol. Following the deaths of 2 Guatemalan children after being taken into... Oh, okay, so here we're back to this. We're back to the Guatemala. Remember this story? Yeah. Protesters plastered dozens of images on pictures, glass, painted walls, mannequins, and vehicles throughout the building. They also posted the pictures of the faces of Border Patrol agents who died in the line of duty. Oh, they posted the stickers and stuff over their faces. So anyway, this is... Oh, listen to this. Military police have blockaded our people at the Border Patrol Museum after our non-violent action to tell the true story of violence. Military police, huh? Interesting. Interesting. The phone number, 870-275-9799. So, the Arkansas Senate yesterday, they voted on which statues to send to Washington, D.C. And I have to say, I think they did a really good job here. They are going to send a statue of Daisy Gatson Bates, who was the Little Rock 9 mentor, Daisy Gatson Bates, to represent Arkansas as a statue. Each state gets 2. And then they're also sending, yeah, that's right, the Arkansas legend, Johnny Cash. There will be a statue. Well, assuming this goes through the House, I can't imagine the House torpedoing this. But they decided on Johnny Cash. Now, this is good. You know, we had Senator Dave Wallace on, and this was after his bill had failed. I think they wanted to get an accurate feel of what the whole body wanted. And so they had this little session, a committee of the whole, where they all voted on, you know, their favorite. And then they did ranked voting, and so the top 2, I believe, was Daisy Gatson Bates, and then the second was Johnny Cash, and so that's what they took. They took the top 2. I think they had a list of 9 potentials to select from. There was no debate. The vote was 33-0 to send Senate Bill 75 by Dave Wallace to the House for further consideration. The Gazette, Michael Wickline notes that Senator Bill Sample of Hot Springs voted present, and that's because, well, some people speculate that he thought the statue should be of Sam Walton because, you know, Arkansas's most successful giant company, you know, Walmart is a success. I mean, it's a global power. But Walmart never played How High's the Water Mama. Walmart doesn't know how to play. Let's see, what's Tennessee Stud. Walmart, or Patriots Song, or The Man in Black, or any of those amazing songs. Walmart doesn't know how to play Johnny Yuma. Walmart doesn't know how to play Understand Your Man. Folsom Prison Blues. Come on now. Anyway, I don't know about you guys. When you and when it comes to Johnny Cash, obviously I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge nerd. You know, I'm a dork or whatever on this. But one of the reasons that I love Johnny Cash is because of the way he sounds, is because of his accent. You know, when Johnny Cash, he speaks a lot of his songs. And he does it really, really well, and it sounds like home to me. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I would call his... I mean, dialects and accents are real specific, but he sounds like, to me, Eastern Arkansas. I mean, I grew up in Eastern Arkansas. He sounds like a family member. He literally sounds like a family member that I would talk to on Thanksgiving or something. You know what I mean? It's the way he sounds. And his specific dialect, just to me, reminds me of home. I can't think of now that's just my opinion. I can't think of a better statue up there to represent the state of Arkansas at the Capitol. And again, this is a trivial matter, but it's also really cool that the Arkansas Senate decided, again, to send, because the statues we have there now, nobody even knows really who they are. It's some governor, senator from the 1800s is up there. And who's the other person? Hang on a second. It says here in the article. Let's see here. 1864, Congress passed a law inviting each state to submit. In 1917, the Arkansas legislature approved a marble statue of Uriah M. Rose, who helped found the Rose Law Firm and the American Bar Association. In 1921, the legislature approved a marble statue of James P. Clark, who was governor from 1895 to 1897 and senator from 1903 to 06. So, obviously, you know, maybe need to modernize. It's been long enough. It's been long enough. But anyway, pretty interesting. So let's see who did Johnny Cash beat out here, and Daisy Bates. Who did they beat out here? Lieutenant Governor Maurice Footsie Britt, former U.S. Senator Hattie Wyatt Caraway, musician James C. Morris, better known as Jimmy Driftwood, Navy SEAL Adam Brown, former state lawmakers William Henry Gray and James T. White, comedians Norris Goff and Chester Lack, better known for their radio acts as Lum and Abner. Yeah, so out of that list, you know, out of that list, and you know, honestly, I don't think a lot of people are going to know who Daisy Gatson Bates is, but certainly somebody worth educating yourself on. You know what I mean? And then the other one, obviously, you know, the most famous, he's just the most famous musician, I think, to come out of Arkansas for sure. I mean, he's one of the most famous musicians in the world, right? All right, so that's what the Arkansas Senate did yesterday. I'm actually going to head down to the Marble Palace as soon as the show is over. When we come back, we're going to be talking. No, I'm sorry. At the top of the next hour, we're going to be talking with Josh Waters. Then we have the UALR Bowen School of Law professor Rob Steinbuck. He's going to be on the program talking about the Freedom of Information Act here in Arkansas and efforts to expand it for more transparency, more taxpayer transparency. So we're going to be able to see what's going on with our money. And this is a bill by Senator Kim Hammer, and we had Kim on last week to talk about it. So I wanted to have Professor Steinbuck on to talk about it a little bit more. He certainly has a grasp of the issue. And there's actually an update because the bill's changed just a little bit from the initial from the initial version. All right, 870-275-9799. We'll be back here in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, Policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Fundamentally overlooked. And so you go from 1860s, the Democrats defending slavery, now to 1973 and up to today. Guess who it has been that has been defending the fact that in America, by law, those little human beings in mothers' wombs are not fully human. They're not given personhood. That's been the Democrat Party in the nation. And, of course, they've got very, very specialized groups that are making that argument, which is your Planned Parenthood, as well as the ACLU and some of their associates in that leftist extremist arena. And those groups literally are sitting at committee tables and arguing to keep killing babies in mothers' wombs. Paul, I sat there the other day. Mary Bentley in the House had asked me to come down. She is the House sponsor. And I sat with her.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
So, real quick, somebody on Facebook, and I appreciate all opinions. I appreciate all the participation. I really do. But somebody on Facebook, was saying, hey, is Johnny Cash really the statue to sin? He committed adultery, left his family. That doesn't sound like anyone that deserves a statue over military. That's a good point. I will say this. We're all human beings, okay? Johnny Cash's story, in my opinion, the reason I'm a huge fan is he's somebody who was in the entertainment industry, and he struggled. Oh, my gosh, he struggled. But his story is one of redemption. Case in point, back in 2005, there was a piece written over at Christianity Today, a guy by the name of Dave Burbanski. He's writing about Johnny Cash, and he talks about how there was at one point there was a writer, who was attempting to paint Johnny Cash into a corner, baiting him to acknowledge a single denominational persuasion at the center of his heart when it came to being a Christian. So which denomination is it, Johnny? Which one is it? Okay? And this is what Johnny Cash said. Quote, reportedly said, quote, I, as a believer that Jesus of Nazareth, a Jew, the Christ of the Greeks, was the anointed one of God, born of the seed of David upon faith as Abraham has faith, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, am grafted onto the true vine, and am one of the heirs of God's covenant with Israel, end quote. The writer was like, what? And Johnny Cash responded, I'm a Christian. Don't put me in another box. Interesting. So anyway, I posted that story at the Facebook feed if you want to read a little bit more about Johnny Cash. But I mean, this is just me personally. I just happen to have a platform and also happen to be a Johnny Cash fan. We have Johnny Cash Fridays on the show. And the Arkansas Senate also just happened to vote yesterday to send Johnny Cash's statue to the Capitol to replace two people who are up there that we don't know who they are. And so, yeah, excuse me for being a little happy this morning. I'm happy about that. And Johnny Cash is a veteran as well. Thank you, Gene. Thank you. Anyway, we appreciate all the comments and all. Thank you for participating and listening to the show. And while you're online, if you're online right now and you're listening to the show, we would really appreciate you making sure you go over to the YouTube channel and subscribe to Conduit News on YouTube and click the little bell to receive notifications. And also, you can support us over at Patreon. Patreon.com/CNR. For as little as $5 a month, you get a bonus video. Last week's bonus video was actually on the Jussie Smollett situation. Before, I didn't talk about it at all last week. And, so you kind of got my thoughts on the whole situation early. All right, so we're going to take a break. We got one more hour coming your way next, and we'll be talking with Mr. Josh Waters. So we're excited to talk to him. The Conduit scorecard is up for week number 5 of the 92nd General Assembly. You can go there, look at it right now at conduitnews.com.
Talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
And we presented the heartbeat bill in the House Public Health Committee. I don't know if you saw any of that footage, but there was 2 Planned Parenthood representatives that came to the table to speak. And I was astounded to sit there and listen to an African-American lady explain that abortion should continue to be made available because Hispanics and black people disproportionately use that abortion service.
Wow.
I had to actually look at her twice, and, I couldn't believe that that's what she's saying at the table. They're so blinded. The people that support abortion now in America, that are the activists, are so blinded by this, they don't understand that they will speak and tell you that we must keep abortion legal in America, killing little babies in mothers' wombs, and then in 30 minutes they could be talking about animal welfare and say that we should punish and charge with a crime and imprison people for harming a little puppy or a little kitten. It's as if they have a complete disconnect from the humanity of a little child and the humane treatment of an animal, or a kitten or a puppy.
Yeah.
And so in Arkansas, I would want the people that are listening to know, we're clearly a pro-life state. We were protecting the lives of children in mothers' wombs before the Roe v. Wade decision, as was most other states in the country. And then a federal judge, the federal judges on the Supreme Court in this case, I believe it was 7 of them, made the decision that no, you're able to take the life of this child. But in Arkansas, we had this legacy, if you will, or this history of protecting life. And so we began to try to fight back against that and do the best. So over time, in 1988, the state passed Amendment 68, which says that in our Constitution, we declare that we believe life begins at conception and we will protect it, and that no public funds shall be used for abortion. Now, it does state in Amendment 68 that we believe life begins at conception and that abortion is only acceptable in the case of saving the life of the mother, okay? And then you come in and you see the heartbeat bill that we've passed. You see other things that we've done over the last few decades. Very clear, we want to protect life. And so SB 149 is very simple. At the very moment that Roe v. Wade, or the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case decided and overturned, restoring rights to the states to regulate or prohibit abortion, or a constitutional amendment might be passed, which actually allows us the authority again to regulate or prohibit abortion. Once this law passes today, and Governor Hutchinson signs it into law in the next few days, we are set that immediately when that situation appears, that Arkansas would abolish abortion, and it would be this group of legislators and Governor Hutchinson that set that in motion. And I'm very proud. I saw Governor Hutchinson last night. Of all the issues that we could discuss, Paul, we discussed this very issue.
That's good.
And he's prepared for this bill. He's prepared to sign this bill into law. And I'm very proud today. We did not plan it this way, but it is perfect that on Valentine's Day, when we talk about the love in our heart for other people, true love is going to be shown on the Arkansas House floor. We say it's time to stop killing innocent little human babies.
We're talking with Senator Jason Rapert about this bill, this what's known nationally as an abortion trigger law. Senator, I know in your Senate testimony and in the Senate committee testimony, you did mention 60 million children since 1973. You mentioned in 2017 in Arkansas over 3,000 babies killed in the state. I was watching Tucker Carlson last night, and he had, at the very end of his show, he had this ministry from Hungary on, and they were talking about all the things that Hungary is doing to encourage couples to have more kids. Even Russia does this. They've got a whole holiday where because they value life, and they look at us over here. And if you look at what we've done, if people want to say be scared of Russia, well, I don't buy the hype, but I am worried about it when they have a different view of life than we do over here.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, Arkansas. Welcome to the program. Good morning, everybody out there. Title of Hour One's podcast, Mr. Cash Goes to Washington. Yes. You're welcome for that title. You can check it out if you want to know what we're talking about. Anyway, it is time. It's Tuesday. It's week number 5 of the Arkansas Legislative session, the 92nd General Assembly. And so, as always, we got Mr. Josh Waters on the line. We're going to go over the Week 5 Conduit scorecard. Josh, welcome back to the show, sir. How are you? Oh, Josh. Oh, we got to turn you on, Josh. Josh, how are you, sir?
Oh, hey, Paul. Good morning. I'm doing good.
Yeah, well, awesome. So, let's just kind of get right to it. We've got the graphic. We're ready. Let's go and throw this up there. Normally, we start with support bills, and I know there's only 2 bills that are on the scorecard this week. We're going to start with a bill that is opposed. What can you tell us about SB 336, HJR 1018, and SJR 14? So I guess it's 3 bills, but it's all part of one highway tax package.
That's right, Paul. You've been covering it. It was announced last week. This is the highway tax hike plan, and these are the 3 bills or one bill and a constitutional amendment that would raise people's taxes here in Arkansas. They'd be paying more through all items through extension of a half-cent sales tax. Be paying more for items that are transport because there's also a diesel tax increase. And overall, over $4 billion in tax revenue spent on highway maintenance over the next 10 years under this plan.
Wow. So it's actually, it's a no-brainer. If we're looking at these pieces of legislation, does it does it spend money we don't have? Does it increase dependency on government? Does it grow the size of government? Well, taking more money from the people is a growth in government, and so it's very, very easy to oppose on that ground, right?
Yeah, this is the classic spending money we don't have. The money's not there, and so they're, instead of cutting spending somewhere else and prioritizing roads with current funds, they're going out and they're going to be raising taxes. So it is 2 different measures, and so Senate Bill 336, that's the bill that will go through. It's going to be coming through the Senate side, and it's supposed to be heard actually tomorrow in the Revenue and Tax Committee. But what that bill would do is that's the tax increase. It's a new sales tax at the wholesale level on gas and diesel. And so it's a formula. It's kind of confusing, but at the end of the day, what it does, the way the math works out, people would be paying 3 cents more per gallon for gas, and then 6 cents more per gallon for diesel. The bill also, Paul, for anyone listening that's driving this morning, if they have a hybrid car or electric vehicle, not too many electric vehicles, but a lot of people have a hybrid car, they're going to have to be paying $100 more per year as a new registration fee under this proposed bill.
Okay, let's take this kind of one at a time. Let's back up here because there's a lot of hidden costs here that maybe we don't even realize. Now, one of those you mentioned, if you're talking about it's more expensive for trucks that use diesel, they're going to be paying more. So you say that, does that mean some of the goods and stuff that we buy at stores could go up because now the cost to transport those goods has gone up?
Yep, that's exactly right. Anytime a tax is placed on a corporation such as a trucking line, a trucking company, those costs are passed on to consumers. So whatever the additional cost is going to cost to transport these items, at the end of the day, when they're sitting on the shelf, the price of those is going to go up. And that's just from the diesel tax increase. Those items will also be more expensive because they're going to be hot. Currently, right now, there's a sales tax increase that was passed, set to expire. This would put an indefinite, permanent sales tax increase on the board. So it's kind of a double, triple, quadruple whammy when you're seeing this. As you're driving to go get your new items, you're going to be paying more. Once you get there, you're going to be paying more. And when you're driving home, you're going to be paying more. So that's the gist, of the plan. It's a tax hike. There's some funds that are diverted from casino revenue that's going to be coming in. That's part of the bill. But the big pieces there are the gas tax increase.
Wow. So this would raise, I'm looking here at the Tax Foundation. They've got a map here. And I know maps were important when it comes to the income tax, but we've got the highest gas tax in the region, or of the states that surround us right now at 21. Let's see here. Well, it's number 40. I'm having trouble reading this number here. 21.80. Okay, so 21.80 cents, and this would bring it up to 24.4 cents per gallon for regular gas and 28.5 cents for diesel. Is that correct, Josh?
Yes.
Okay. And then you talk about the registration fees, $100 for hybrid vehicles. If you have an electric vehicle, $200 a year. Yeah, so again, just kind of come back to the principles here. It's an easy bill to oppose. If it's going to raise more money from the people, and I want to point out here, that, over at conduitnews.com, you reference the, let's see here, Arkansas Democrat-Gazette is saying right now the average person in Arkansas is paying $318 a year for highway maintenance. And we're giving almost $1 billion right now. We're already giving the government almost $1 billion to build our highways. And that's not enough, apparently. So, when you look at those optics, it's like, you kind of feel like we're at a tipping point here where the citizens, how much can you actually tax the citizens of Arkansas? At what point is it just too much?
Yeah, this bill, unfortunately, it increases that overall tax burden. It's what people feel, right? And we already know the tax burden in Arkansas. When you look at it as a business tax climate, we're 46 out of 50. The worst state in the region, the worst state in the South, and the worst red state. And so, it just doesn't really line up. But this would increase the overall tax burden. What you're saying, we already pay $318 per person on roads, $1 billion annually. This would increase $414 million a year in addition to that $1 billion that's already spent.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a massive highway plan.
Yeah, it really is. And The correct number is actually $414 million. I know $300 million is thrown away or thrown out there, but that's only because if you only look at what the state's going to get, we have cities and counties that are going to get a lot of this money too. And here's the crux of it for me. I drive around on roads that I'm not happy with. And so there's going to be a lot of people, I think, who are tempted to say, okay, let's go ahead and do this because we want better roads. But I think I don't think you should trust the government to do that, because we're already giving them a lot of our money, and they are failing to build the roads with what we're already giving them, which is a lot. It is a lot of money. And so what makes any of us think that they're going to change their behavior? I mean, if they're not, and I wish, and I say this with all due respect, but if they're going to do this, and they're Republicans, and they're going to do this, I do feel like they owe the public an explanation, at least something to show us that says, hey, we've already cut this, still not enough. We've cut this, still not enough. We've looked at cutting this, but we can't. Where's that conversation, Josh?
Yeah, Paul, and that's kind of where we're at. There's been some tax cuts this session. There was an income tax cut, and that's good. But at the end of the day, if they cut taxes in one spot but raise them the same or more somewhere else, how is that overall burden, the amount of money that's going to government? What does that look like? Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, that's what affects the economy. Will there be more people in people's pockets to start the economy, or will it be in government? And of course, I think there's a strong argument saying highways help the economy, but the numbers we're looking at here are just so massive. So these are two different measures. So procedurally, the bill, Senate Bill 336, that'll go through like a typical piece of legislation. It'll go through committee, through both chambers, and be voted up or down and then become law. Mm-hmm. Now, the other proposal, that would be extension of the half-cent sales tax increase. That would be a proposed constitutional amendment that is referred out to the people. So the people will have an opportunity, if this goes forward, to vote up or down on increasing, taxes on themselves to the tune of almost $300 million and almost $300 billion under just the proposed constitutional amendment.
Yeah. I was going to say, so the proposed constitutional amendment, I thought that was closer to $200 million. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. Well, $205 million is the state portion, and then $88 million is cities and counties.
There we go again. It's worked. It worked on me, Josh. It worked on me.
There you
go. Yeah. So okay. So that is something. So that's $300 million right there. That if the people in 2020 say no. We don't want this. We want the sales tax to go down because it was set to expire back in 2012. I mean, that's a possibility here that happens. But here we do have, something that can kind of fuel the skepticism of people who, we want to trust government, and this is set to expire, but now that they've gotten used to the certain, amount of revenue from the people, they don't want to let it go, and so they're sending it back to us. It's funny, even when government is set to shrink, meaning less money to the government, which means it's set to shrink. It's in the statute. It's going to shrink if you just leave it alone. We have people that say no. We need to make sure that you really want it to shrink, even though it's already set to. So that's frustrating. So it's an easy bill to oppose. It's taking more money from the people. It's an increase in the size of government, and so it's understandable why Conduit opposes it just on those grounds alone. And it'll be interesting to see what happens in the committee tomorrow. Let's talk about a bill that made the scorecard, Josh. That Conduit is supporting. It is SB 308, civil asset forfeiture reform by Senator Bart Hester, a Republican, and State Representative Austin McCullum, also a Republican. What can you tell us about this bill?
Yeah, so this is a problem all over the country, the idea of civil asset forfeiture. And simplified, for people who might not know what that means, it's basically the government and law enforcement stealing people's stuff before they've ever been convicted of a crime. And so what happens is when someone's arrested, they'll seize assets such as a car, cash, guns, anything that they, in their just kind of discretion, think is part of a crime, part of carrying out a crime. And so those assets are seized up front, and then basically the person then has to prove their innocence. And in America, we have a presumption of innocence, yet these civil asset forfeiture laws are on the books. So this bill, Paul, would flip that and say, hey, it makes it harder for government to steal people's stuff before being convicted of a crime. And this specific piece of legislation would require a person to first be convicted of a felony offense related to the property being seized. So move in the right direction for sure on civil asset forfeiture.
Yeah, that's something that's bothered me for a long time, civil asset forfeiture. So this bill by Senator Hester and Representative McCollum is a bill to protect private property, is really what it is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Paul, the Institute for Justice studied states and how they rank basically on this civil asset forfeiture. And Arkansas got a D- grade. And when you look at the numbers, you might say, well, how much is this actually costing people? Over $80 million in assets from the people of Arkansas have been seized by the government since 2000 under this scheme, really, is how you can call it.
Yeah, there was one guy. Wasn't there one guy who was traveling through Arkansas trying to get to Memphis to buy a car, and he had like $10,000 on him, and he got pulled over for speeding, and they just took his $10,000, and he never got it back or something?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think I remember reading saying, well, no one, has that much cash on them unless it's drugs. Like, no, that's not how our laws work in America. We have a presumption of innocence. You can't just take people's money because you think it might be related to drugs, especially if they're showing and saying, hey, I'm going to buy this car over in Memphis. But, yeah, Paul, that's a real-world example. And so I think this is a good bill to say, hey, they have to be convicted of a felony offense related to the property being seized before they can see it. Now, there's an exception in there saying if it's part of it can still be forfeited, meaning the government can still keep the assets if it's part of a negotiated plea agreement. So it's still kind of dangling their own property in front of them to get a plea agreement. So that's kind of questionable. But overall, it would improve the civil asset forfeiture scheme here in Arkansas under this bill.
Yeah, man, it kind of and this is the type of stuff, and I know it doesn't happen often, but you have local law enforcement that might be tempted to, use this money to fund their local department, and so it can kind of create a perverse incentive there. But it also, I think, when this happens, it's something that is hurting the reputation of law enforcement, because most of law enforcement is, they're fantastic, upstanding folks, and I'm glad that they're doing it, But it's stuff like this that I think doesn't need to happen, I mean, and if you go read up on, and I don't have the story in front of me, but if you go read up on this particular incident that happened in Arkansas, I mean, it's not like this gentleman didn't try to get his money back. I mean, he attempted. He went to court, and just it was a nightmare. It just to be able to get something that was rightfully his. So we have to be very careful. I mean, everybody was upset with Brett Kavanaugh and the way the media treated him. They treated him as being guilty, that you have to prove your innocence. Well, that's exactly what civil asset forfeiture is. You're having to prove your innocence, and there's no assumption that you are innocent, and that's the actual legal standard, is that you're innocent until proven guilty. Josh. Yeah,
it's kind of a bedrock of society. Don't hurt people and don't steal their stuff.
There we go.
Let's stick to that, and this bill works further towards that. Paul, part of this situation too, there's this perverse incentive for law enforcement to get this money, because they get to keep the money or the assets and sell the assets, and then use that money within that law enforcement agency. It's divvied up to different funds here in the state. I think some may go to the crime lab. So there's actually a perverse incentive to try to get even more and more assets that they can. Mm-hmm. So this bill is really neat. That number, $80 million taken away from people here in Arkansas since 2000, that's a big number.
Do you think that the Municipal League and the County Association of Counties, are they going to oppose this bill by Senator Hester and Representative McCollum?
I'm not sure. That they routinely, anything that's going to shrink government, they'll routinely lobby against it. And so if it means less money somehow going to a city or county somewhere in Arkansas, they might.
Yeah. Real quick, Josh, it is Scope Week.
Yes.
This is a big week in terms of deregulating, giving people more choice.
Yeah, it's a big week. I know you had Representative Eubanks on, and I know we talked last week or week before, Paul. It's so hard here in Arkansas. There's so many steps or guardrails put up to try to increase the scope of practice, to try to decrease regulation and occupational licensure. So this is the first week they can even really begin that process and debate in those public health committees. So they'll be doing that today. I know there's some special orders of business in the House Public Health Committee this morning, and then again on Thursday. And so, advanced practice nurses, that's going to be a big topic this week, and expanding that scope of practice for them. So it's going to be a busy week overall with the highway plan and Scope Week.
All right, Mr. Josh Waters, we appreciate it, sir, and I'll see you at the Marble Palace.
All right, we'll see you down there, Paul. Thanks.
All right, thank you, folks. We're going to take a break here. Coming up, we're going to be talking in the next half hour to a professor from the UALR Bowen School of Law. He's going to be talking about the Freedom of Information Act. Mr. Professor Robert Steinbuch will be on the program. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.
Right. Well, I think if you go back several decades, Paul, I don't know what Russian leaders stated it, but I think of Khrushchev when they talked about they could take America without ever firing a shot.
Yes.
And part of that, at another time on another program, if you ever go back and take a look at some of the Communist Manifesto that was stated in the 1960s and read into the congressional record about what they would do to change the future of America, one of those is not valuing life. When you get a culture to get to the point that they actually kill their own children, that they take the lives of their babies, that's why when I think about what happened in World War II and the Holocaust, and I think about what happened in Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis that killed 1 million of their own people, we think of those things and we immediately have the negative connotation.
Let's face it, times are tough for the Arkansas General Assembly. They're all waiting for the spotlight exposing public corruption to end, so they won't be under so much scrutiny. And during this time, what if you're a legislator and you need money? What if you're slapped with a huge expense? What if your check for consultant services is late this month? Or maybe you just need extra cash now until payday. When that happens, you can't wait. Hi, I'm Bobby Blackmail for the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank, your trusted source to over 135 lenders to get you short-term cash fast. Use the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank today, and you can have up to $12,500 cash in your checking account tomorrow. Dried-up bribes no longer coming from Medicaid entities? Handled. Extra cash until your hopeful acquittal? Done. And you'll be surprised at how easy it is to get extra cash. Just be an elected official and be comfortable with the status quo, and we'll connect you with a fellow legislator who is ready to loan. It's quick and easy. And don't worry if you can't make the payments, because the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank is designed to help you get through these tough economic times. There are other ways you can pay off your debt, like by voting the way the establishment wants, or by rewarding some with committee chairmanships. So forget about overdraft fees and the spirit of covetousness that sometimes overwhelms the best of lawmakers. Just remember, the Arkansas Intra-Legislator Bank for short-term cash between colleagues when you need it fast.
Some transactions have long-term consequences.
Paul Harrell, parody.
Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Let's see here. I want to remind everybody out there that Chris Ann Hall, constitutional educator, is touring Arkansas this week. Chris Ann Hall, she's a former prosecutor. She's a talk radio host. She travels the country teaching the Constitution and the history that gave us our founding documents. We've had her on the program. I think she's scheduled to be on this week sometime. On February 18th, Chris Ann Hall, well, so this has already happened. She's presenting at the AQ Chicken House Restaurant in Springdale. That already happened yesterday. Today, Chris Ann will be presenting on America Disarmed in the Warren Rec Room in Alma at 6:30 tonight. Chris Ann Hall, again, in the Warren Rec Room in Alma at 6:30 tonight. Then the next day on the 20th, she'll be in Silosaw, Oklahoma at the Sequoia County Fairgrounds at 7. Then she is back in Arkansas on the 21st talking about state sovereignty at the Hilton Garden Inn in Jonesboro at 5:30. On the 22nd, she's in Jonesboro talking about America Disarmed again at the Hilton Garden Inn at 5. We were up against a hard break, but she's even got more stops after that. Go to conduitnews.com for details.
This is bad. This is wrong. This is horrible. But yet in this nation, we have somehow convinced and made a case that it's rational that an innocent little baby should simply be killed. And it's to the point now in Virginia with Governor Northam, which I'm going to tell you, I know they got all upset about his blackface issue there. But I'm much more upset that you would have the leader of a state, one of the largest in the country, right on the footsteps of the capital of the nation, state that a baby could be born alive, lay there on a table, and die. I don't understand the mindset or the thought process for a person that would say and even argue that you let a little baby lie on a table struggle in agony. That means that he gives more deference to a person being executed on death row, making sure they're comfortable, than you would a baby that's going to lie there and struggle in pain.
And you were
can't understand.
I know, and you were asked the question. I can't remember, but one of your colleagues, a Democrat on the Senate floor, asked you if we're going to be pro-life, then we also need to be against the death penalty. And your response was absolutely really good. And I'd like for you to share that with us again if you can remember it.
Well, I want to give you a little backstory on this because God does work in mysterious ways. When she stood and asked that question, it was the first time in a Senate committee or on the Senate floor that they had put that right in my hand. And I was immediately ready because that's exactly what was said to me in the office of Governor Mike Beebe in 2013 when I was passing the very first heartbeat bill. And we had passed that bill with the Republican legislature, and this is why I want to say, please continue to get social and fiscal conservatives in office. We passed that heartbeat bill. Governor Mike Beebe sat there with me and one of his assistants, it's actually his chief of staff, and several of his staff behind me. I was the only other person in the room sitting in the middle of all that. And he told me, he said, Jason, I'm going to veto the bill. He said, I put my hand on the Bible and I swore that I would uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Arkansas Constitution. And son, he said, your bill is unconstitutional. I've got to veto it. I said, well, Governor, and I told this on the floor, this is what you're referring to. I said, Governor, I made a decision. I'm not going to argue with you when I came in here. But I've given you a choice. And it's the only choice that you've ever had in your career that you could sign a bill and save the lives of thousands.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Real quick, I want to talk about a local issue real quick because it's just so well written. And we've interviewed him on the program before, Libertarian Joseph Bollinger. He's, speaking out against raising taxes locally. If we're raising taxes at the pump, if that's what we're going to end up doing, which is something that doesn't need to happen, the local communities, if they keep raising taxes, the state keeps raising taxes. I mean, I think at some point we have to realize that it is directly affecting our economic prosperity. And I don't know if anybody saw Sean Hannity last night. I'm going to use some of the audio from Hannity. Going to use some of that audio tomorrow probably because it was just incredible about these liberal states that are overtaxing, how people are leaving. I mean, people are fleeing these states. Folks, the fact of the matter is we have the biggest government around in our region of surrounding states. We have the largest government per capita. And that is why we are poorer. Okay? The size of our government is above average for the capita per citizen. And I think it's a direct result. I think it directly impacts our economic conditions. So fighting local tax increases is tough. Joseph Bollinger writes that on March 12th, up at conduitnews.com, on March 12th, there will be a special election in Benton County to increase the sales tax by 1/8 cent for 4.5 years to help pay for a new $30 million courthouse and a $5 million worth of renovations of the old courthouse in Bentonville, downtown. The special election could have been on the general election ballot. The second reading was in April 2018, but the third and final reading was intentionally delayed until December. The county says this was so they could educate the voters about the issue, but I was attending the quorum court the evening that they had experts come in and explain it to the JPs that if they want the measure to pass, they need to have it during a special election. Now that, if that's true, that is immoral. That is morally wrong. To put something in a special election so you can thwart the will of the people by intentionally setting it up to where you know you're not going to have an accurate snapshot of what the public thinks about a particular issue because they're busy working so they can pay your stupid tax. The current county judge ran in 2016, he goes on a platform of not increasing taxes, wanting to build a sensible building while continuing to use our current court facilities. Unfortunately, he has done none of this. Instead, he is listening to special interest donors who want to build the courthouse downtown. During his 2016 election, he raised around $20,000 from assorted members of the Walton family and others associated with the Waltons. He goes on to talk about the Walton Family Foundation will also be donating $2 million to assist with the project. While I appreciate the Waltons donating to this project, Joseph Bollinger goes on, I do not like the stipulation of this donation that requires the courthouse to be downtown. The downtown parking district, that is a combination of different businesses in Bentonville, including Walmart, is also offering to build a 400-spot parking garage by the courthouse. Once again, I appreciate this offer, but they are also saying this won't be built if the courthouse is not built downtown. They are marketing heavily about if you vote for the courthouse, you will get a free parking garage. So that's part of the marketing pitch here. This is incorrect because of 2 points. First, the county will be responsible for maintenance for each reserved spot the court will use. This will cost $85 per space per year. He goes on to list the details. The Libertarian Party of Benton County proposed plans that would meet the needs of the county for only $15 million. This option was not even considered. Now, you can see the interview that we conducted with Mr. Bollinger more on this issue, but I just wanted to direct your attention to this opinion piece. Again, it's up at conduitnews.com, urging people to vote no on a local tax increase. I have a feeling with the way things are, we're going to start seeing a lot more of this. Now, we already do. We see it a lot a year. We see it over in Fort Smith with the Marshall's Museum project. But I have been under the opinion that our budgetary status in this state as a whole is, I don't think a lot of people understand what's coming down the pike. And we're starting to see the trickle effect, the small thing, but I just think right now we're over leveraging ourselves, and these governments they think they have no other option besides to go back to the people and ask for more of their money. Folks, I got to sit down with Robert Steinbuck yesterday to talk about the Freedom of Information Act, the importance of it in Arkansas, and an idea, a bill by Senator Kim Hammer to expand it. Here's my interview with Professor Robert Steinbuck.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. You know, last week we were telling you about the strength of Arkansas's Freedom of Information law, the Freedom of Information Act. And we actually interviewed State Senator Kim Hammer on his bill, SB 231, which would expand the Freedom of Information law. Something like if you are like a nonprofit and you've got or a private entity and you spend 20% of your time or resources and efforts to support a government entity, you would be subject to the Freedom of Information Act law. I wanted to actually also talk to a professor of the Bowen School of Law here in Arkansas. His name is Robert Steinbuck, and he joins us now via phone. Robert, thanks for coming on the program.
It's my pleasure.
So, are you familiar with this effort by Senator Kim Hammer?
Yes. In fact, it has changed somewhat, but the purpose is the same. The details of the law have changed to make it more clear, but the purpose is the same. There are a number of these private, not-for-profit entities in the state that are essentially analogs to government entities. They do fundraising. They use the name of the entity. It's often confusing when a member of the public looks at this private entity as to whether it is indeed a private entity or whether it is the public entity itself. And I believe, in fact, that these entities are created in part with the purpose of avoiding transparency laws. And Senator Hammer's effort is to say these entities are engaging in governmental type work, and they're using the name of the state and governmental entities so that they can do the fundraising, and as a consequence, they should be subject to the Freedom of Information Act.
Wow, now that is fascinating to me, because you said that you think some of these entities that are being set up, you think they're purposely set up to avoid specifically the FOIA law.
I think that is part of the purpose as to why they're set up the way they're set up, yes.
Wow. Well, in the interest of transparency, I'm glad that both of you guys are working on this issue. Now, could you give me any examples? I mean, do you have any of these entities in mind that you could give us that are already doing this?
Well, there have been a number of articles in the Democrat Gazette over the last several years dealing with fundraising entities attached to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. Those entities relating to athletics and more broadly relating to the university itself. And they have, the Democrat Gazette rather, has sought to get records from these entities regarding fundraising in the name of the university. And repeatedly, those entities have stated, and this was in the press, and this is how I know it, that they are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act.
Wow. Okay, so that's fascinating. So I hadn't thought about the University of Arkansas fundraising in this capacity. Do you think that there's some instances where people think that they are funding the government, or is it clear that they are funding a private entity? Do they know it's a private entity, but they're using the state of Arkansas's name in requesting the funds?
I think there's a lot of confusion out there. And I think that confusion is fostered by the close relationship of these entities to public entities, as well as the nomenclature used by these entities.
Is there, so I get generally that this is a great idea. Again, we're talking with Professor Robert Steinbuck from the Bowen School of Law. He's a professor there. We're talking about SB 231, expanding the Freedom of Information Act law to apply to some of these entities that are technically private, but the line's blurry, isn't it, Robert? The line between where the government ends and the private entity begins is blurry at this point, right?
Indeed. And so as to not perpetrate blurring the lines myself, let me just make clear to your audience that I'm appearing in my individual capacity and not on behalf of the law school or the university. But that's exactly the problem, is that these entities use the names of the public entities that they're fundraising for, and I think people routinely confuse the two.
So is there, obviously we want the transparency. We want to know, we want them to be, we want them to comply with the Freedom of Information Act if we're talking about public time, public money, that sort of thing. Is there anything that has happened that's made the headlines that we think would have been corrected had the public had a peek at the books or anything like that? Or is this all just trying to be, what's called left of bang? We're doing this so that we can prevent potential future problems.
I think there have been enough stories in the press about these types of entities that had there been greater public transparency to begin with, at least some of them would not have, at least some of the events giving rise to the stories likely would not have occurred. Transparency is the means by which the public directly and the public through the press, like people like you, are able to examine the goings-on of their elected officials and their government officials, their unelected bureaucrats, to determine whether or not there's wrongdoing, be it malicious wrongdoing or just negligent wrongdoing. And I believe with greater transparency, we almost invariably have less wrongdoing.
Now, you go ahead.
Just given the level of opacity that we've seen over many years, I find it hard to believe that had there been greater transparency all along, that all of the problems that have ultimately been revealed would have occurred in the way that they've occurred.
So on the Conduit scorecard here, I'm going to cut here over to the screen. This was a couple weeks ago, SB 231. You mentioned earlier, Robert, that the bill maybe has changed a little bit. Let me tell you the original interpretation that's up at conduitnews.com. This bill would expand application of the Freedom of Information law to a private entity expending a minimum of 20% of its time, resources, or efforts in support of a government entity. Governments sometimes set up private entities to carry out taxpayer-funded functions. These private entities are then exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, keeping taxpayers in the dark on what the entity is doing with taxpayer money. This bill would capture those entities and make them subject to the Arkansas FOIA. So has the bill kind of changed from that?
No, that language is all correct, but for the 20%. We've gone to essentially a purpose description now, which probably captures fewer entities. So it's a more cautious bill, and we'll see how that works out. And if it works out well, then no change would be necessary. If it doesn't capture enough organizations out there, then in the future that enactment would need to be enhanced. And so we essentially took out that number that's referenced in the description. But other than that, everything else about the description is entirely accurate. Okay,
so how do you determine when you say purpose? It's not 20%; it's the purpose. So is that? I'm confused.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, it says, and I don't have the bill in front of me, but the language says something to the extent of, if the purpose of the private entity is to act in support of a public entity, then it shall be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. So one can envision, to be clear and to be fair, that there's an organization that does some fundraising for a public entity, but it's not its primary purpose, and as a consequence, might not get swept up by the scope of this bill. And that's why I pointed out to you that the new version of the bill is more narrow than the 20% version of the bill.
Wow.
But it most assuredly would capture these large entities that have the name of the public entity within the name of the private entity and whose sole purpose seems to be to support the public entity.
Yeah.
So I think it would do a remarkable good and likely capture a significant part of the problem that we're seeing, but it might leave some things out, and if it's too much in the end, then we'll have to come back in the future and enhance the law.
Yeah, you're right. That it can always be an incremental approach. Let me ask you this, Robert Steinbuck: has this ever been tried before? Has correcting this problem, to your knowledge, ever been attempted?
In the state of Arkansas, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. Oh, but maybe this has happened in other states.
Well, other states already have made clear that these types of entities are subject to the Freedom of Information Act there. And so there's nothing novel about the concept of capturing these agencies, these entities, in the Freedom of Information Act. I suspect you'll hear resistance from some of them saying, oh my goodness, we don't know how to operate in such a regime. It's unprecedented. If they were to say that, they would be essentially creating nonsense, because it's simply not true. Not whether they know how to do it, I can't speak to their competence, but whether an institution is capable of complying with the FOIA, even though it's a nonprofit, that occurs routinely across the country.
Yeah, you're right. But I see what you're doing there. You're anticipating the arguments against this idea at the end of a table in some committee room, and that's certainly what they might say. But if other states are already doing this, here's an example where we need to at least have transparency laws that are on par with our neighbors, and so that's reasonable and appropriate. And I certainly appreciate you coming on the program, Professor Robert Steinbuch, and I would love to have you back on if and when there are new developments on this issue, sir.
We'll do it. Thank you very much.
All righty, thank you. You have a great day. Folks, we're going to take a break, and we're going to be back here in just a moment. Thanks for listening. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Of little children. And I said, I'm glad you brought up the U.S. Constitution because I made those same oaths when I was elected. In the U.S. Constitution, there is no place there where it says there is a right to kill a little baby. There's no right to abortion. And you also bring up the Arkansas Constitution. In that Constitution, it says in this order as that life begins at conception and we shall protect it in the state of Arkansas. So if there's anybody here that's actually breaking their oath, it would be you. And then you said you put your hand on the Bible. And I want you to know that in the Bible it says that when he spoke to Jeremiah, he had knew him before he formed him in the womb. And that's when Paul, his chief of staff, got a little bit angry. And he said, Senator, it sounds to me like you're getting ready to get rid of the death penalty. And I said, you know what? I've been thinking about it. I said, because there's a difference, though.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
I just wanted everyone to see this whiteboard real quick. Cut spending is what it says. Let's give it a glance real quick. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Cut spending. That's all it says. I almost thought, well, should we put please cut spending, please? Please cut spending? I just think that's what needs to happen. And again, listen, it appears if you look at the Senate tax, the Senate highway bill. If you look at this thing, it's got tax increases in it. It's trying to get more revenue from the people. Now, it's already got 22 co-sponsors. I mean, it's fast tracked. It's good to go. I mean, I think that's an easy thing to predict. I do think though that it would be nice if there was some conversation of there's no other option. I mean, I know the highway department says there's no other option, but the highway department is almost as bad as the Arkansas Game and Fish in this state. Okay? There needs to be massive reforms done to some of these agencies that are more powerful than your average agency, let's say. I mean, that's not going to happen. And if it was proposed, I'm sure it would have to be relegated to some sort of special committee, to study for a year. But I would say if you're going to do this, if you're going to raise taxes at the wholesale level and create a brand new tax, if that's what you're going to do, I just think that the people need to be told we cut spending here and here. If you can't decide, make the agencies decide. Why isn't there a bill out there? Or here's an idea. Let's just say, what about an idea of saying each agency has to cut 5%? And just leave it up to the agency head. You figure out how to spend 5% less next year. And then we can take that money and we put it towards roads. But you're going to have to give us, and you're going to spend 5% less this year than you did last year. What about 1%? My goodness, what about 1%? It's just 1%. And that can be done. Or maybe it can't, but has it even been pursued? If you're going to ask the people for more money, which is clearly a violation of the Republican platform, if you're going to do this, then I just feel like there needs to be some conversation of, well, we tried everything we could, but we all agree we got to have good roads. Yeah, we do agree. We want good roads to drive on. It actually helps commerce. You can make all of those arguments. It helps the economy. But we're already giving you $300+ a person for roads. And yet it's not enough. What out there makes us think, especially because we're going to be asked to vote for a new sales tax, to extend the sales tax, but it's set to expire right now. What has the government done, honest question, to change the behavior? I mean, they raised the sales tax in 2012 to pay for certain projects. They said it was going to sunset, but now they need it again. They keep coming back to us. Now they're going to raise the taxes at the pump. They keep coming back to us asking for more money. What have they done to change their behavior to where they will stop coming back to us to more money? And I don't think the answer is to index it to where it increases every year if you need it to. I don't think that's the answer either. I just feel like, listen to me, I sound like a snowflake. I just feel like I think it would be appropriate for a serious discussion to take place as to, we've turned over the couch cushion. We've looked for all the loose change we could find. We've asked state agencies to cut 1% of their spending. And we still need a little bit of money. I mean, I think most people, if that had even happened, they might be like, okay, well, all right. At least you tried. Has there even been a legitimate attempt to rein spending in. Where is that attempt? I mean, there was a little bit of a spark when you had a few legislators who were trying to rein in appropriations. They were trying to stop these state agencies from asking for appropriations that far exceed what they actually spent last year. And that's in case if extra money comes in, they can still have a chance to get it. So I understand that. I really do. And that was a good thing. But where is that? Let's take those legislators who dared to try to stop this ridiculous appropriation process. Let's go further and let's have the conversation, especially if we're going to raise taxes for roads. I mean, we're already giving the government almost $1 billion for roads every year. What's the deal? Folks, I'll be broadcasting from the Answer Studios tomorrow in Little Rock with our coverage from the 92nd General Assembly.